The muscle up for a lot of us is that move that we see or have a crack at that gives us our introduction into bodyweight strength and calisthenics. And for me, that was definitely the case when I bought my first set of rings and was just figuring out how to even unpack them and hang them up, and first just stabilize myself on the rings that felt very shaky at the time. Once I was able to get my dips and my pull-ups going, I was quickly chasing that elusive muscle up, and luckily at the time I had a good friend that had some experience, shout out Will, who helped me along the way and eventually get me from underneath the rings to on top of them. So today we're going to talk about the 3 steps you need to get your first ring muscle up. So those 3 things that we're going to need are a pull-up, a dip, and the transition. However, it's not that simple. We need the strength to be able to do not just a pull-up, but a false grip high pull. We need the range not just for a dip, but a deep enough dip that's going to one day convert into a muscle up. And we need to be able to understand and coordinate the skill, the transition where we go from underneath the rings to on top of the rings. Before we go any further, if you're someone who's still working towards your pull-up and your dip, this might be a video to double back on once those pull-ups and dips are feeling really solid. And for those of you who are in that boat, you can go ahead and download my free Bronastics program where you can work on the skill, the range, and the strength to be ready for these muscle ups at a later date. Step 1, we're going to look at the skill, the transition. First thing we need to address here is the grip. If I just take a regulation grip with the hands around the rings, it's going to make my muscle up a lot more difficult and demand a lot more strength and power. However, if I take a false grip where my hand is on top of the rings, this is going to make the transition from getting underneath the rings to on top much smoother and easier. So with your false grip, rather than gripping the rings regulation, we're going to think about the ring actually resting in this nook between the wrist and the hand. So it might be useful to have a little bit of chalk on the outside of the hand, and we're going to think about placing that part, that nook between the wrist and the hands, on top of the rings. So we're effectively reaching through the rings. This is going to take range and strength through the forearm to be able to get enough grip strength to still hold on. Now, word of warning for those that might have tried false grip, or if you've never done it before, it is not the most comfortable thing in the world, but it does get easier over time. The body is pretty amazing at adapting, but it's very normal to not have much strength to grip when you're in that flexed position of the wrist. So it's important that when we're training the skill, especially starting off, we find a challenging yet doable level as we adapt and get stronger. Once we've built up a sufficient false grip, this can be done with hanging, feet supported or not, false grip ring rows. We want to start to practice maintaining that false grip as we grease the groove of the skill itself, which is the transition, where once we finish our false grip high pull, we want to be able to transition through to make our dip, completing the muscle up. So this transition we're going to train by assuming a false grip, starting underneath the rings, and for this drill I've got my feet on the floor. I'm simulating the top of a high pull, so my knuckles are facing forward. I've got my thumb connected to the lower part of my chest, and then from here I'm going to take the elbows back behind me and come through the rings until I'm in the bottom of a deep dip. I go from my deep dip, I keep the thumbs connected to the body until I'm back where I started at the top of that false grip high pull. And I'm just going to practice transitioning, top of a high pull, bottom of a dip. And what's most important here is that I keep the connection. I don't want to let any space get between my thumbs and my body. I want to use that feet assistance on the floor to stay connected. This is vital when we start to train with less support, feet in the air, and go for the muscle up. So you may have noticed the catch position during my transition set and the depth at which I receive that dip. Now this is a crucial mistake I see a lot of guys make that really have all the pieces for a muscle up. They've got a nice strong dip, they're even adding weight, but they haven't been training a full range of motion. Therefore, the strength they've built is not specific to the skill they are chasing. So if we look back to those transitions where I catch in this deep dip position, it's important that with our strength work, we're using that same range of motion so that we're strong enough to press up and out and finish our muscle up. So meet yourself with where you're at. If that means you need to keep a foot on the floor in the bottom portion of your dip, if you need to use some band assistance, go ahead and build that specific strength so that it translates to the skill you're working on. Now, speaking of specific strength, we're going to move on to part 3, the final part of our muscle up, and in my opinion, the hardest part, the biggest roadblock, and the final piece of the puzzle, and where I see guys not quite getting there because it's tricky. It's tricky to build a really strong false grip high pull. Often I see guys with a monster weighted chin up, but the false grip is not strong enough, or the false grip is strong, yet the pull is not high enough. So with these ones, it's all about specificity with our strength training. Just like the dip, you can have a 40 kilo weighted dip, but if it's not through that deep position, you're gonna have a hard time doing a muscle up. Doesn't mean you can't do one, it's just gonna make it less efficient. So our false grip high pull, as the name suggests, we're gonna be in a false grip. And we're gonna try and maintain that false grip as we pull, not just to a chin up height, but all the way up until the thumbs are on that lower part of the chest, which you might have remembered from part 1, our transition. We want to have the thumbs connected to the lower part of the chest. If we only build our pull to here where the thumbs are more in line with the collarbone, we can still get a muscle up. It's just going to make that transition a hell of a lot harder. So the higher that you can build a strong false pull, the easier and more reps you're going to get with your muscle up. So make sure we're getting those thumbs all the way to the lower part of the chest with this one. All right, now it's time to put it all together. Want to make sure I start with a nice high pull, bringing the thumbs all the way down to the lower part of the chest. Head comes through, elbows go back, transition, before dipping up to finish. Now, as I said before, if you don't have that super high pull, it's going to make life a lot harder. You can still get your muscle up, just requires a lot more effort. It's less efficient. Maybe you can get away with it if you're more mobile through the shoulders. But like I said, it's worth building that nice strong high pull, and it makes that transition much smoother, where you're going to be able to crank out not only reps, but tempo, slow muscle ups, and build a stronger foundation to go on with your rings practice, forwards rolls, shoulder stands, all that good stuff. So if you think you're going pretty well with those 3 steps, a nice strong high pull with a good false grip, you're understanding the transition, you're coordinating it well, and you've also got not only the strength for your dip, but the range. But still, even though you've nailed those 3 steps, you're not quite getting that muscle up. Here's 2 bonus tips that might help get you over the line. And we're going to look at the eye line and the body line. So I'm going to do 2 reps here, and I want you to notice the eyes and also the hips, well, the whole lower body, the legs. So from the bottom of the muscle up, I'm going to be looking up toward the rings. As I finish my high pull, I'm going to pike through the hips and send my legs forward, also sending my eye line forward to finish in my dip position. Let's take a look. So from the bottom, I'm looking up toward the rings. As I pull up, I'm going to pike through the hips, sending the legs into an L sit before driving up to finish. One more time, eyes up to the rings, legs get sent forward, hips get sent back, eye line is forward, and I push up. So 2 bonus tips there. Eyes up, hips back. As the hips pike back and the legs get sent forward, so do the eyes push through to finish. Now to finish up, I want to stress the importance of specificity. With these movements like deep dips and extra high pulls, something like the false grip that's quite unnatural, these movements will not come right away if they're new to you. So it's important to use assistance to be able to train the specific ranges of motions and positions that are going to actually translate to the movement you're chasing. So for example, with your false grip high pull, a feet assistance can be really useful, so you're not just training a false grip chin up that's going to make your transition super inefficient and a lot harder than it needs to be. You can use some feet assistance to be able to get yourself into that specific position where you'll need to be for your first muscle up. Same goes with the dip. Meet yourself where you're at. Just because you've got a super strong bar dip, maybe you're even adding weight, doesn't mean that dip is going to translate to your muscle up. So humble yourself, grab out the old band, use a bit of feet assistance if you need in order to make those reps specific reps. So I hope you found some of those tips useful, and all the best on your muscle up journey. Please be sure to let me know how you're going with it. You can shoot me a DM on Instagram, and as I mentioned earlier, if you want to download that free Bronastics program, I'll chuck it in the comments section below. And all the best with your muscle ups. I'll see you guys in the next one.